Saddam Hussein Abd al-Majid al-Tikriti was born near Tikrit in northern Iraq on April 28, 1937. His early life was marked by poverty and instability. He grew up in a peasant family. His father disappeared months before his birth or died shortly after. His stepfather reportedly treated him harshly. These formative experiences likely shaped his worldview and his later political resolve. He moved to Baghdad as a young man, seeking education and opportunity. It was in the capital that his political consciousness began to awaken, drawing him towards the currents of Arab nationalism, then sweeping the Middle East. He was keen to make his mark on a rapidly changing Iraq. In 1957, at the age of 20, Saddam Hussein formally joined the Ba'ath Party. This pan-Arab socialist organization offered a potent ideology for young men like him. The Ba'ath Party advocated for Arab unity, freedom from foreign influence, and social justice. Saddam quickly became an active member. He participated in various party activities, some clandestine and dangerous. His commitment and willingness to take risks did not go unnoticed by the party leadership. He was involved in an assassination attempt against the then Iraqi Prime Minister Abd al-Karim Qasim in 1959. The attempt failed, and Saddam was wounded, forcing him to flee Iraq for a period of exile in Syria and later Egypt. His time in exile was not wasted. Saddam continued his political activities and education. He studied law in Cairo. He remained deeply involved in Ba'ath Party affairs from abroad. The party itself was undergoing internal power struggles and ideological debates. Saddam carefully navigated these complexities. He returned to Iraq after the Ba'ath Party seized power in a coup in February 1963, only for the party to be ousted later that year. He was imprisoned, but continued his party work from within. His influence grew. He was instrumental in the planning and execution of the 17th of July Revolution in 1968. This bloodless coup brought the Ba'ath Party back to power, this time more securely. Following the 1968 coup, Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, a relative of Saddam, became president. Saddam Hussein was appointed vice chairman of the Revolutionary Command Council. He was effectively the regime's second-in-command. Over the next decade, he systematically consolidated his power. He built a formidable security apparatus. He placed loyalists in key positions within the government, the military, and the party. He was known for his meticulous attention to detail and his ruthlessness in dealing with perceived enemies. By the late 1970s, Saddam Hussein was the undisputed strongman of Iraq, even before formally taking the presidency. His rise was a testament to his political acumen and his unyielding ambition. Once firmly established as vice president, Saddam Hussein oversaw significant changes to Iraq's economy and society. One of his most impactful early actions was the nationalization of the Iraq Petroleum Company in 1972. This move wrested control of Iraq's vast oil wealth from foreign corporations. It was hailed by many as a bold assertion of national sovereignty. The oil revenues, particularly after the price surge in 1973, funded ambitious development programs. These programs aimed to modernize Iraq and improve the living standards of its citizens. The nationalization was a cornerstone of the Ba'ath Party's socialist agenda, promising to use the nation's resources for the benefit of its people rather than foreign interests. Saddam Hussein's regime also invested heavily in public services. Free healthcare was introduced across the country. This was a significant development for a nation where access to medical treatment had often been limited, especially in rural areas. Alongside healthcare, education was made free at all levels, from primary school to university. Literacy campaigns were launched, dramatically increasing the number of Iraqis who could read and write. These social programs were genuinely popular. They contributed to a period of relative prosperity and development in Iraq during the 1970s. For many ordinary Iraqis, these initiatives represented tangible benefits of Ba'athist rule, improving their daily lives and future prospects considerably. However, this period of development was also shadowed by internal conflict and repression. Saddam Hussein presided over the Second Iraqi-Kurdish War, which lasted from 1974 to 1975. The Kurdish population in northern Iraq had long sought greater autonomy. The Ba'athist government was determined to maintain centralized control. The war was brutal, resulting in significant casualties and displacement among the Kurdish people. The insurgency was eventually crushed, partly due to a strategic agreement with Iran. This demonstrated Saddam's resolve to use force to maintain Iraq's territorial integrity as defined by Baghdad, and his unwillingness to concede to minority demands for self-rule. In 1975, Saddam Hussein, still vice president, signed the Algiers Agreement with the Shah of Iran. This treaty aimed to settle long-standing border disputes between the two nations. A key component was the Shatt al-Arab waterway. In return for Iran ending its support for the Kurdish rebels in Iraq, Iraq made territorial concessions along the waterway. While this agreement temporarily stabilized relations with Iran and helped end the Kurdish war, it was a contentious issue within Iraq. Some saw it as a necessary compromise, others viewed it as a capitulation. This agreement would later become a pretext for Saddam Hussein, once president, to launch the Iran-Iraq war, claiming Iran had violated its terms. In July 1979, President Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr resigned, citing health reasons. Saddam Hussein formally assumed the presidency. One of his first acts was to purge the Ba'ath Party of perceived rivals. Dozens of high-ranking officials were accused of treason and executed. This brutal display solidified his absolute control. Just over a year later, in September 1980, Saddam ordered the invasion of Iran. He cited the Algiers Agreement violations and fears of the Iranian Revolution spreading. He also saw an opportunity to seize oil-rich Iranian territory and establish Iraq as the dominant regional power. The Iran-Iraq war would last for 8 devastating years, causing immense human suffering and economic damage to both countries. The Iran-Iraq war became a brutal war of attrition. Millions of soldiers and civilians were killed or wounded. Chemical weapons were used, notably by Iraq. The conflict saw trench warfare reminiscent of the First World War. Despite initial Iraqi advances, Iranian forces rallied and pushed back. The war ended in a stalemate in 1988, with no significant territorial changes. During the latter stages of this war, Saddam Hussein launched the Anfal campaign against Iraq's Kurdish population. The Kurds had sided with Iran during the conflict. The Anfal campaign, conducted between 1986 and 1989, involved mass killings, forced displacement, and the infamous chemical attack on Halabja in 1988. It was a genocidal campaign. 2 years after the costly war with Iran concluded, Saddam Hussein turned his attention south. In August 1990, Iraqi forces invaded and swiftly occupied Kuwait. Saddam accused Kuwait of slant drilling into Iraqi oil fields and exceeding OPEC production quotas, thereby driving down oil prices. He also revived historical Iraqi claims to Kuwaiti territory. The invasion was met with immediate international condemnation. The United Nations Security Council passed resolutions demanding Iraq's withdrawal. The annexation of Kuwait was a gamble. Saddam perhaps believed the international community would not intervene forcefully. He miscalculated badly. This act of aggression set the stage for another major conflict. The invasion of Kuwait led directly to the Gulf War in January 1991. A United States-led coalition of forces launched a massive air and ground campaign to liberate Kuwait. Iraqi forces were quickly overwhelmed and expelled from the emirate. The war was a humiliating defeat for Saddam Hussein. It resulted in heavy Iraqi casualties and significant damage to the country's infrastructure. In the aftermath of the defeat, uprisings erupted among the Shia population in southern Iraq and the Kurds in the north. Saddam's regime brutally suppressed these rebellions, thousands were killed, and many more fled. The defeat and the subsequent sanctions imposed by the UN crippled Iraq's economy for years to come. Throughout the 1990s, Saddam Hussein's Iraq remained isolated internationally. Strict UN sanctions, imposed after the Kuwait invasion, caused severe hardship for the Iraqi people. Despite this, Saddam maintained his grip on power. He implemented what was known as the Faith Campaign, Al-Hamla al-Imaniya. This policy aimed to promote a more Islamist agenda within Iraq. It involved building new mosques, promoting religious education, and incorporating more religious rhetoric into public life. Some saw this as a genuine shift in his ideology. Others viewed it as a cynical attempt to bolster his legitimacy and popular support in the face of internal dissent and external pressure. His regime continued to be characterized by authoritarian rule and widespread human rights abuses. The political landscape shifted dramatically after the September 11th attacks in the United States in 2001. Though Iraq had no connection to the attacks, the U.S. administration under President George W. Bush began to focus on Saddam Hussein's regime. Accusations were made that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, WMDs, and had links to terrorist groups. These claims, later found to be largely false or unsubstantiated, formed the justification for military action. In March 2003, a U.S.-led coalition invaded Iraq, bypassing a UN Security Council consensus. The invasion aimed to topple Saddam Hussein's government. The Iraqi military, weakened by years of sanctions and previous conflicts, offered little effective resistance. Baghdad fell within weeks. Saddam Hussein himself evaded capture for several months following the fall of his regime. He was eventually found hiding in a small underground bunker near his hometown of Tikrit in December 2003. His capture was a significant moment, symbolizing the end of his long rule. He was subsequently handed over to the Iraqi interim government. He faced trial before the Iraqi High Tribunal. The charges included crimes against humanity, specifically relating to the Dujail massacre in 1982, where 148 Shia civilians were killed following an assassination attempt against him. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. Saddam Hussein was executed by hanging on December 30, 2006. The legacy of Saddam Hussein remains deeply divisive. To his supporters, particularly some Arabs, he was a strong leader. They saw him as someone who modernized Iraq, stood up to Western imperialism, and defended Arab interests. They point to the social programs and the period of stability before the devastating wars. However, for many Iraqis, especially Kurds and Shias, and for much of the international community, he was a brutal tyrant. His regime was responsible for the deaths and disappearances of hundreds of thousands of its own citizens, according to organizations like Human Rights Watch. His rule was marked by aggressive wars, systematic repression, and a pervasive cult of personality. The Iraq he left behind was fractured and struggling with the consequences of decades of his authoritarian control and conflict.